March 11, 1945. Kanoya Air Base, Kyushu, Japan.
The hand of the intelligence officer shook as he examined reconnaissance photographs from submarine I-47, recording an observation that would haunt Japanese naval command for the remainder of the conflict.
Concrete vessel observed. No visible weaponry. Heavy refrigeration machinery.
Multiple small craft conducting transfers.
Classification: unknown logistics vessel.
Through grainy periscope images taken near Ulithi Atoll, he had documented something that contradicted everything the Imperial Japanese Navy believed about wartime priorities. While pilots at his airfield extracted pine root oil to supplement aviation fuel, a desperate program employing 34,000 distillation units yielding only 3,000 barrels total, and mechanics drained industrial alcohol from equipment to power aircraft, the Americans had deployed what appeared to be a non-combat vessel dedicated entirely to refrigeration.
24 Yokosuka P-1Y-1 Francis bombers sat on the runway for Operation Tan No. 2. The pilots, many with less than 50 hours of flight training, were poised to fly their explosives-laden aircraft into the American fleet at Ulithi.
What none of them realized was that they were attacking an enemy that had built a $1 million floating factory producing 500 gallons of ice cream per shift, 5 tons of frozen dessert daily, while Japanese forces scraped pine bark for fuel.
The first hints of this reality emerged through prisoner interrogations following the Battle of Leyte Gulf in October 1944. When the carrier Zuikaku sank on October 25, American destroyers rescued Japanese sailors from the oil-slicked waters. The destroyers Wakatsuki and Kuwa saved 862 officers and crew, while 842 perished. These survivors, expecting execution, instead reported receiving medical care and food, including something they had never experienced: frozen cream served in metal cups. One survivor's account preserved in Allied interrogation files stated, "The American sailor brought me what he called ice cream.
I had heard of this dessert but never tasted it."
Here, after the greatest naval battle in history, Americans were serving frozen treats to enemies we had tried to kill just moments before.
Vice Admiral Takajiro Onishi, architect of the kamikaze special attack units, suppressed such reports. His pilots needed to believe Americans were weak and incapable of enduring hardship.
How else could Japanese spirit overcome industrial superiority? The truth would shatter what remained of fighting morale.
The first documented Japanese observation came through submarine reconnaissance. In December 1944, submarine I-47 under Commander Zenji Orita surfaced near Ulithi for periscope reconnaissance before launching Kit 10-man torpedoes. Orita commanded I-47 from July 10, 1944, through the end of the war, conducting multiple special attack missions.
Orita's log, preserved in Japanese naval archives, records
0630 hours, large concrete vessel observed, approximately 8 am, no weaponry, heavy refrigeration equipment on deck, multiple small craft conducting transfers. What it spotted was the U.S. Navy's large refrigerated barge, BRL, converted from an Army concrete barge at a cost of $1 million, equivalent to $172 million in 2024. This vessel produced 10 gallons of ice cream every 7 minutes, storing 2,000 gallons at 15 degrees Fahrenheit. The barge operated continuously, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, producing 500 gallons per shift, roughly 5 tons daily. By January 1945, Japan's situation had become desperate beyond Western comprehension. Fuel shortages were so extreme that the battleship Yamato could only conduct training exercises at anchor to conserve oil.
The Pine Root Oil Program, employing 34,000 distillation units and mobilizing
400,000 workers, including millions of
school children, ultimately produced
only 3,000 barrels of aviation fuel from 70,000 barrels of pine oil, less than what the U.S. Navy consumed in a single
day of operations. The 343rd Naval Air Group, Kokutai, Japan's last elite fighter unit, commanded by Captain Minoru Gender,
architect of Pearl Harbor, struggled
with severe malnutrition. Gender commanded this unit from January 15, 1945. Tasked with clearing airspace for kamikaze operations. While specific calorie counts aren't Documented, pilots reported night blindness from vitamin deficiency, reduced reflexes, and inability to withstand G-forces during combat maneuvers. Captain Gender himself wrote, "In operational reports, my pilots' eyes fail them at night. Malnutrition has stolen their vision. They shake during combat maneuvers from weakness. Yet they face an enemy who grows stronger each day." The contrast was starkest in the kamikaze units preparing for their final missions. These pilots, many teenagers, with 40 to 50 hours of flight training, received final meals of rice balls, dried fish, and ceremonial sake before their one-way missions. They wore sembari, 1,000-stitch belts sewn by women for spiritual protection. Though everyone knew no cloth could protect against anti-aircraft fire. At Kinoya Air Base on March 11, 1945, kamikaze pilots wrote their death poems before boarding their aircraft. One pilot's poem preserved in the Kinoya Air Base Museum today reads, "Like cherry blossoms in the spring, let us fall pure and radiant." These pilots died attempting to crash into ships at Ulithi, where USS Randolph CV-15 suffered damage at 2007 hours that evening. 1. Francis bomber successfully struck the carrier's stern, killing 25 sailors and wounding 105. The carrier was repaired in 3 weeks, using 29 tons of structural steel, including I-beams salvaged from a Japanese sugar mill on Saipan, during which time her crew consumed approximately 3,000 gallons of ice cream from base facilities. Ulithi represented something beyond Japanese comprehension. This tiny coral atoll, often omitted from maps, had become the world's largest naval facility. By March 1945, when the kamikaze attacks arrived, 722 ships anchored in its lagoon, more vessels than the entire Japanese Navy ever possessed at its peak. This was the staging point for the Okinawa invasion. Base facilities defied Japanese understanding. Complete machine shops in floating dry docks, fleet post office, handling 20 tons of mail daily, movie theaters showing Hollywood films, baseball diamonds on Mogmog Island, a bakery ship producing fresh bread continuously, USS Abaton distilling cedar and baking pies, the ice cream barge producing 5 tons daily. The ice cream barge became legendary among American sailors. Destroyer crews whose ships lacked ice cream equipment would send boats with empty containers, returning with gallons of vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry ice cream. The barge served everyone equally, from admirals to seamen, democracy through dairy. Japanese intelligence struggled to comprehend American supply priorities. Captain Tamikihara, Japan's most successful destroyer commander, who survived all major battles from Pearl Harbor to war's end, later wrote about learning of American comfort provisions. Hara commanded destroyers Amatsu, Kaz, and Shiger, participating in 14 major engagements. "We thought at first the intelligence was wrong," Hara wrote in his memoir. Japanese destroyer captain. Ships dedicated to ice cream while we scraped for fuel. It was incomprehensible that any navy would prioritize such luxury during total war. Naval intelligence reviewed intercepted American supply Manifests that seemed to be in code. Surely ice cream mix meant ammunition. Chocolate syrup indicated fuel oil. Strawberry topping represented medical supplies. No military force would prioritize actual dessert ingredients during intense combat operations. But evidence accumulated relentlessly. Prisoners reported ice cream aboard every American vessel above destroyer size. Reconnaissance showed refrigerated vessels at every American base. Supply manifests consistently included tonnage for morale supplies that exceeded total Japanese food rations for entire fleets. Commander Makatsura Hashimoto of submarine the 58, who would sink USS Indianapolis on July 30, 1945, provided the most detailed Japanese observations during earlier reconnaissance missions. At American bases, he observed through his periscope what seemed impossible. In his memoir, Sunk, The Story of the Japanese Submarine Fleet, 1941 to 1945, Hashimoto wrote, "The Americans operated floating cities of abundance. While we counted our last torpedoes, rationed fuel by the leader, they maintained PCM routines in wartime. This was strength we never imagined, the power to be comfortable during apocalypse." His executive officer recorded similar observations. "We saw sailors in lines at what appeared to be refreshment stands, ships transferred not fuel or ammunition, but white containers, we later learned, contained ice cream. They fought a different war than we did. Japanese pilots shot down and rescued by Americans reported treatment that contradicted everything they had been told. During Operation Kikusui, the 10-mast kamikaze attacks on Okinawa between April and June 1945, captured pilots provided remarkable testimony. One pilot captured after engine failure prevented his suicide attack recorded in post-war interrogation files. The destroyer conducted normal operations during our attack. No panic among the crew. Men at regular stations. Except gunners. White uniformed sailors continued serving food. The ship's routine continued. This was not the desperate enemy we expected. What these pilots witnessed, though not understanding it, was American confidence in their anti-aircraft defenses, allowing normal shipboard routines, including food service, to continue during attacks. While kamikaze pilots approached on their death missions, American sailors maintained ice cream service on deck. By 1945, American ice cream production in the Pacific reached industrial scale that dwarfed entire Japanese food programs. American production Navy barge at Ulithi, 500 gall, 10 gall every 7 minutes. Army ice cream barges, 3 vessels, 1,500 gall combined. Shipboard production. Every carrier, battleship, cruiser had machines, base facilities, multiple plants per location. 1943 dehydrated mix 135 million shipped. Army Quartermaster Corps. Annual production 80 million gallons for military. Japanese reality piner root oil 3,000 barrels total from 34,000 distillation units. Aviation fuel reserves below 1,500,000 barrels by 1945. Civilian calories dropped from 2,000 pre-war to 1,680. By summer 1945,
Tokyo rations 775 calories daily for 6
months in 1946.
Pilot training fuel limited to 40 to 50
hours due to shortage. For perspective, the entire Japanese military's daily rice ration for home island forces totaled less tonnage than American ice cream consumption in the Pacific Theater. Admiral Chester Nimitz, personally approving the ice cream barge, understood something Japanese military hierarchy couldn't accept, that morale wasn't built solely on ideology and sacrifice. In a classified memo, Nimitz wrote, "The Japanese expect our men to endure their conditions and break. We will demonstrate that American industrial might extends to crew comfort. A sailor who knows his country can provide ice cream in combat fights with different confidence than one expecting only hardship." This philosophy extended throughout the Pacific Fleet. The USS Lexington incident at Coral Sea on May 8, 1942,
where sailors raided ice cream stores before abandoning ship, became legend.
Sailors literally scooped ice cream into their helmets before entering life rafts, demonstrating priorities incomprehensible to Japanese military culture built on suffering as virtue. Japanese naval officers who learned about American ice cream operations faced an impossible choice. How could they maintain fighting spirit when the truth would destroy morale? How could they explain that while Japanese sailors received 315 grams of rice daily when available, Americans consumed 5 tons of ice cream from a single barge? Rear Admiral Matagaki, who commanded battleship operations and would lead the final kamikaze mission on August 15, 1945, wrote in his diary after intelligence reports of American comfort levels, "If such reports are true, we have misunderstood this war entirely. Spirit cannot overcome an enemy who brings luxury to battle." The information was classified above top secret. Officers who learned of it were sworn to absolute silence. But truth has a way of seeping through walls of secrecy, spreading through the fleet in whispers and rumors. Japanese radar operators and observers noted B-29 bombers circling at high altitude for no tactical reason. Post-war evidence revealed crews were making ice cream, mixing powdered milk, sugar, and cocoa in ammunition cans, using -50 degrees Fahrenheit temperatures at 30,000 feet to freeze the mixture while turbulence churned it. This level of confidence making dessert over enemy territory that desperately launched fighters powered by pine root oil represented civilizational surplus applied to warfare, while Japanese mechanics drained hydraulic fluid to burn as emergency fuel. American air crews improvised ice cream makers at bombing altitude. Operation Kikusui sent 10 massive kamikaze waves against the American fleet at Okinawa between April 6 and June 22, 1945. A total of 1,465 kamikaze aircraft and 4,000 Japanese pilots died in these attacks. Japanese pilots flew obsolete aircraft powered by alcohol-diluted fuel that reduced engine performance by 30%. Their final meals consisted of rice balls and water, often their only substantial food in days. After the massive April 6, 1945 attack involving 355 kamikaze aircraft that sank 6 Ships and damaged 22 others, American. Fleet reports noted, morale remains high. Ice cream consumption increased 40% post-action.
The psychological impact of ice cream
after combat cannot be overstated. It's represented normally, comfort, home. Japanese naval personnel captured at Okinawa, 11,250. Surrendered in total, provided detailed accounts that shattered Japanese assumptions. One destroyer officer pulled from the water after his ship sank, reported through interpreters.
I expected torture, perhaps execution.
The treatment we gave American prisoners. Instead, a young American
sailor, younger than my youngest
brother, brought me ice cream, vanilla, in a metal cup.
He seemed embarrassed.
They had run out of chocolate. I cried.
Not from gratitude, but from
understanding we had already lost a nation that provides ice cream to enemies had won before fighting began. These accounts suppressed during the war,
but documented in occupation records,
revealed the gulf between the two forces
exceeded anything Japanese command had
imagined. During the occupation starting August 1945, American forces distributed ice cream to Japanese children, many tasting it for the first time in their lives. The
psychological impact proved profound. Everything the military government had
told the Japanese people about American barbarism and weakness was disproven by
a simple frozen dessert.
Lieutenant
Saburo Sakai, Japan's leading surviving ace with 64 confirmed victories, tasted
ice cream for the first time at a U.S. air base in 1946. He later wrote in his memoir, Samurai Cologne, I understood finally why we lost. We fought believing suffering made us strong.
They fought with the confidence
of abundance. We thought comfort was weakness. They knew comfort was a right their industry could guarantee anywhere. Statistical reality of two different wars. The final numbers tell the complete story of two nations fighting entirely different kinds of war. American production 1945. Navy ice cream barge 500 gall daily 10 gall per 7 minutes. Army barges 3 vessels 1,500 gall daily combined. Total military ice cream 80 million gallons annually. Dehydrated mix 1943 million shipped globally. Equipment every ship above destroyer size had ice cream machines. Cost $1 million per barge, $17.2 million in 2024. Japanese reality, 1945. Rice ration, 315 g per sailor when available. Pine root oil, 3,000 barrels. Total from 70,000 barrels of pine oil. Workers mobilized 400,000 for pine root program. Distillation units 34,000. Deployed nationwide. Pilot training reduced to 40 to 50 hours versus 500. Plus pre-war. Fuel quality 30% alcohol mixture. Reducing engine performance. 4. Japanese military culture built on Bushido, the way of the warrior, and the acceptance of suffering as spiritual purification. American ice cream ships represented something incomprehensible. They saw comfort not as weakness but as strength multiplier. Abundance not as decadence but as strategic advantage. Captain Mitsuo Fuida, who led the Pearl Harbor attack and survived the war later, converted to Christianity and became a Pacifist. Asked about his transformation, he said, "I learned Americans fed ice cream to their enemies. Not just food, luxury food.
This was not the barbaric enemy we were
told about. This was a civilization so confident in victory they could afford kindness and comfort during war." The ice
cream ships challenged every assumption
about warfare that Japanese military
culture held sacred.
At a 1985 U.S.-Japan veteran reunion in Hawaii, the cultural gap remained evident. Former CB Robert
Mitchell, who had worked on the Ulithi
base, was asked about the ice cream barge by Japanese veterans who still struggled to understand it 40 years later. Mitchell shrugged. "We figured boys fighting needed ice cream. Didn't seem special at the time. It was just
what you did, take care of the troops.
If we could build it, why wouldn't we?" This casual attitude that ice cream was so normal, so expected that its provision in wartime seemed unremarkable, illustrated the gulf between the navies better than any battle statistics. Former kamikaze pilot trainer Tadamasa Itatsu, who attended the reunion,
responded, "We trained boys to die with
empty stomachs.
You trained boys to live
with full stomachs and dessert. This difference explains everything about the war." Dr. John Dyer, in his Pulitzer Prize-winning Embracing Defeat Japan in
the Wake of World War II, wrote, "The ice cream barge at Ulithi was worth more
than a fleet of battleships as demonstration of American power. It said, we can afford this. We have already won. We are simply waiting for you to realize it." Military historian Richard Frank noted, "Japanese forces fought expecting to die gloriously. American forces fought expecting to live comfortably. This wasn't just a different strategy. It was a different civilization's approach to warfare." Today at the Kanoya Air Base Museum in Kagoshima Prefecture, a memorial to the kamikaze pilots who flew from this base. A small, often overlooked placard mentions American ice cream ships. Added in the 1990s, it provides context for understanding the impossible disparity these pilots faced. The museum displays a kamikaze pilot's final meal, a small
rice ball, pickled vegetables, and a cup
of sake next to a photograph of the
American ice cream barge at Uli, obtained
from U.S. Navy archives. No explanation is needed.
The image tells the entire story
of the Pacific War. Museum curator Tishiro Yamada explained, "We added this display because visitors, especially young people, couldn't understand how we lost so completely. When they see that America built ships just for ice cream while we scraped pine trees for fuel, they understand it wasn't just military defeat. It was the collision of scarcity with abundance. The story of Japanese commanders discovering American ice cream ships
reveals the fundamental nature of power.
In modern warfare,
Japan believed power came from spirit, from will, from the
ability to endure unlimited suffering.
America demonstrated that true power
came from the ability to eliminate suffering, to provide abundance, to maintain normally even in extremity. The kamikaze pilots, noble in their sacrifice, flew into an enemy fighting a fundamentally different kind of war.
While Japan scraped pine roots for fuel, producing 3,000 barrels from 34,000.
Distillation units, America built. $1 million ice cream barges. While Japanese pilots wrote death poems before
their final 50-hour training flights,
American sailors chose between vanilla and chocolate.
While Japan measured victory in
spiritual terms, America measured it in industrial output, including the output of ice cream at 10 gallons every 7 minutes. The war ended not when Japan ran out of pilots willing to die. They never did. But when Japanese leadership finally understood what they were fighting against, not just military
might, but a society so powerful it
could dedicate ships to desert. So confident it saw comfort as essential. So abundant it could afford to be
wasteful with luxury items while
fighting a global war. In the final analysis, the statistics tell everything. American ships at Ulithi 722. Japanese ships in entire navy at peak approximately 700. American ice cream production 500 gall per shift from one barge. Japanese aviation fuel from pine roots 3,000 barrels total. American bomber crews making ice cream at 30,000 foot. Japanese pilots 40 to 50 hours training on diluted fuel. American sailors complaining about ice cream flavors. Japanese sailors 315 g of rice when available. Japanese commanders who discovered America had ships just for making ice cream discovered something more profound than military
intelligence. They realized they were fighting an enemy who had already secured victory, who understood their dominance, and who were so confident of triumph that they brought dessert to the apocalypse.
The ice cream ships demonstrated what the atomic bombs would later confirm.
Japan was waging the last war of scarcity against the first war of plenty. The result was as inevitable as it was unfathomable to those who believed that hardship was strength. They discovered too late that true power lay in having so much resources that suffering was unnecessary. The $1 million ice cream barge at Ulithi, producing 10 gallons every 7 minutes while Japanese pilots prepared to die, was more than a ship. It was evidence of a society that had already won the war before it had even started. In their world of bitter pine root fuel and desperate sacrifice, American ice cream vessels were not merely astonishing, they were proof that Japan had fundamentally misjudged the nature of the conflict. They had brought spirit to a contest of industrial might. They had brought deprivation to a battle against comfort. They had already been defeated.